been enough to help a lot of people get back on their feet. We just got an announcement today from the governor that an additional $220 million plus in federal assistance that we helped get through HUD, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, is ready to be distributed in New Jersey. I've been pushing for that to be accelerated. It's been a long time in coming, but that provides an additional bucket of assistance that we will be able to tap into over the coming months. Learn more about the FEMA programs on this in this discussion. I just want to stress that I'm also focused on the future. We're in hurricane season again. We do not want to live in the way that we have in a constant cycle of flooding and rebuilding, flooding and rebuilding. We have to invest a lot more in resiliency, in the engineering that will protect us from our rivers and streams turning into the Mississippi River every couple of years. And the good news is that with the infrastructure bill that we passed last year, there's now significantly more funding coming down from the federal level to help us do that. The Army Corps of Engineers has some really important projects in New Jersey. One of them is in the Greenbrook area, so Somerset County, particularly affected by that project. It began in the 1970s and it's been stalled. And we finally got full funding for that project to be completed. And I'm working on a lot of others that will impact our local communities. And then finally, I hope we all agree that the long-term solution to this problem is to deal with climate change, a warming climate that is producing increasingly intense storms. We can't let this problem get even worse than it is. And so I'm happy that this summer, finally, Congress, defying all the expectations, all the odds, passed a significant bill to make America a leader in the fight against climate change once again. The biggest investment that our country has ever made in transitioning to clean energy. It'll make clean energy more affordable for all of us, so it helps in that way. It'll help protect us against climate change in the future and create millions of jobs in America in these high-tech industries, clean energy industries of the future. So I'm happy to report we're actually getting some stuff done in Washington on issues that affect our lives, including this one. So with that, I want to turn it over to Race, who will give you a brief rundown on the work that FEMA has been doing, and then take any specific questions that you might have about that. Thanks again for joining. Look forward to the next one of these.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that introduction. And welcome to everyone that is able to join us. My name is Race Hodges, and I am an emergency management specialist with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, here in Region 2. I'm thankful for the opportunity to join you all today to talk about flood preparation. So I wanted to start by just going over quickly about what exactly is a flood. So flooding is defined as a temporary overview of water onto land that is normally dry. Floods may result from rain, snow, coastal storms, storm surges, and overflows of dams and other water systems. They may develop slowly or quickly. Flash floods can come with no warning, and floods may result in power outages. They may disrupt transportation corridors. They may damage buildings, create landslides, and of course result in many other types of damages. On the right side of the screen, just sharing a little fact, floods are in fact the most common natural disaster in the US. So it's very important that as a nation, we are taking steps to prepare for flooding, both individually at the individual level, at the community level, so on and so forth, because of the significant risk that they pose to people's lives across the country. I wanted to start by going through some steps that we recommend for people that are interested in becoming more prepared for flooding. The first step is to know your risk to floods. And in preparation for this presentation, I visited FEMA's MAP Service Center and was looking around the district to see if I could explain a little bit about how FEMA's flood maps are structured, and then also encourage you, if you are not aware of your flood risk, that you have the ability to go to our map service center online, which is msc.fema.gov. And you are actually able to type in your address, and it will take you to the flood information panel that your address is located in. And it will look something like this. There's a lot of different information that is on a flood map. However, there's a selection here in the legend that I did want to share. So this image is actually from the borough of Lebanon. And what you see going on here is a few different polygons on this screenshot. What we see in the blue shaded area is the zone A, or the 100-year flood zone. Another way to define what a 100-year flood zone means is that for a homeowner here, they would have a 26% chance of a severe flood occurring over the life of a typical 30-year mortgage. So again, that's a 26% chance of severe flooding over the life of a typical 30-year mortgage. And then in the orange color, that is the 500-year flood zone. And another way to understand what that means is that there is a 6% chance of a severe flooding event occurring over the life of a typical 30-year mortgage. So just very important that everyone understands what their flood risk is. I remember there was about a 2-week time period last year where 5 1,000-year flooding events occurred. And just because your residence is not located within an area such as indicated on this map, a zone A, or perhaps a 500-year flood inundation area, does not mean that your property cannot flood. Floods regularly and often do exceed the boundaries that are produced in these maps. However, this is an excellent resource to better understand the flood risk that is in the communities that you live in. So please, please write down this URL and you visit this website to get a little bit better understanding of the unique flood risk that you may face in your neighborhood. I was also curious to look at what types of flood risk there may be in the district. One of the things that I was very interested in was the significant stream miles that are in the 7th district. So I just made a very quick map and wanted to just remind or mention that it looks like there are a significant number of streams within the district. And although I don't live in this district, I would recommend that everyone be cognizant of a potential stream near where you live or where you work, because this does look like there may be significant risk to riverine flooding, flash flooding events, severe rain events that may cause these streams to overflow. And if you are in an area that is close to a body of water, such as these streams that are depicted on this map, it's just something to be cognizant of and to be aware of. So that does appear to be a potential risk for this district. So I would encourage everyone to become familiar with those bodies of water that may pose a threat where you live or work. I wanted to share a short video that talks about some flood risk basics and things that communities across the country are doing to take action on minimizing their flood risk. So this is a short video, and I'll resume with the PowerPoint presentation after its conclusion.
I went there on a middle school field trip. I got engaged there. We've celebrated every wedding anniversary there. It looked like a war zone, like someone had dropped a bomb. We never thought the river would be coming down the street. After this devastating 2016 flash flood, residents in Ellicott City worked hard to recover and reopen their businesses. Less than 2 years later, another flash flood tore down Main Street. I just kept thinking, I can't believe we're going down this road again. We are going to have to make some changes if we think we're going to protect people in the future. There is an element of acceptance that we will flood again. These events remind us how important it is for communities to understand their flood risk and use that information to help reduce risk. In San Marcos, Texas, a close call in 2015 prompted the Rand family to learn more about their flood risk.
The water had come to our floorboards. We did not get flood damage, but it was down to the wire. The house is full of so many memories, and I cannot imagine what it would feel like to lose all of this. In terms of how the house is raised right now, we are currently about 8.5 feet up in the air. The reason we were really emphatic that we wanted to go this height is we met with the city engineer who showed us the flood elevation maps.
Floodplains are typically low-lying areas that carry and disperse water. Flood risk is dynamic, and everyone has some form of risk. Flood risk is informed by flood hazards in your area, such as storms, changing weather patterns, development, and sometimes changes to the landscape. These and other hazards can be dangerous for people and property, so to determine flood risk, officials must consider the following. How likely is it to happen? How often does it happen? And how bad could it be? But as a community changes, so can its flood risk. Some of that change is caused by people and some by nature.
The interesting thing about Ellicott City is its topography. It is a steep slope with narrow river channels. When it rains really hard, the water moves real fast, and if it gets real deep, it comes out of the channels, and then it just goes down Main Street.
Communities do have the ability to lower their flood risk. Preventative measures, also known as mitigation, can improve a community's chances of avoiding catastrophic damage. Smart land use and building codes, green infrastructure, floodproofing, or raising a home's elevation are just a few solutions that can change the future of a community.
Some of the simplest things are just to be aware of what's going on around you, to have a plan. Different home improvement projects that people might undertake, it may sound simple, but just, your gutters, making sure that all of those are free of debris that can actually keep the water off your home. We've done several things in San Marcos to mitigate risk. We actually changed our floodplain ordinance, and so we require folks to build 2 feet above the flood level in the permitting process. I think we feel more prepared in the way that we understand what can happen and how quickly water can rise. We hope that people, through the things that we've experienced, have a special awareness to that.
At first, your flood risk might seem intimidating, but taking action to reduce flood risk can save you money on flood insurance and also save so much more. Learn more about your flood risk and how to better prepare your community against flooding. Visit fema.gov/mitigation.
All right, thank you. I always find that video very powerful because we do get to hear firsthand accounts of people that have experienced flooding and some things that communities are doing to mitigate future risk as well. For the next slide, I wanted to just do a quick check and maybe engage in a activity with you all, not one that I am asking for your verbal participation in, but maybe you can just think about the answers to these questions to yourself. So just as a quick check for know your risk to floods, do you know what flood zone you're in? If you don't, again, I would recommend that you go to our mapping service center, msc.fema.gov, enter your address, and you'll be able to, similar to Google Maps, be able to zoom in and out and understand exactly where your residence or place of work, place of worship, so on and so forth, are located in terms of a flood risk. What are the closest bodies of water to you? So in the previous, one of the previous slides, we reviewed some of the streams that are in the 7th district, but it's also just very important to be cognizant of where those bodies of water are, because during a potential flash flooding event or a riverine flooding event, there is a high risk that those bodies of water may overflow, causing impediments to transportation, resulting in residential, commercial flooding, so on and so forth. So it's very important to be cognizant of the location of those bodies of water. Are your storm drains clear of debris? are your gutters clear of debris? In the video, there was a person that was mentioning some very basic things can make a world of difference in terms of reducing flooding to properties. In my experience, I have firsthand experience of having gone through flooding as a child when I was growing up. In one instance, there was a storm drain that was becoming clogged with debris, and the water was backing up and entering the home. Had that storm drain been cleared, that water would have been able to drain out, and our home would not have flooded. So it's just very important to make sure that the storm drains are clear. There's not debris maybe that is being blown out when you're landscaping, that kind of thing, down storm drains, because they do provide that critical service for moving water out of harm's way during severe rainfall events. Is your house slab on grade? Are you familiar with the type of elevation? Is it elevated on fill or otherwise? I recall a few experiences responding to flood events during my career in the aftermath of a flood, when people are ripping out the drywall and putting their damaged belongings out on the street. I recall a neighborhood where there was a home elevated on fill that did not flood, but the homes right next to it, which were lower than that elevated home, had all of that debris in their belongings and drywall, so on and so forth, ripped out and placed on the side of the road for the garbage companies to pick up. So it's just very important to understand, the risk that your residents may face in terms of how it is constructed. Is there a reservoir or a dam or a levee near you? Another instance that I experienced myself when I was a very small child was during a flash flooding event, when a local river authority made a very tough decision to do a slow release of water to prevent a local dam from flooding. And during that event, I was in about 5th grade. The local municipality had sent the fire department out to our neighborhood, and they were going door to door telling us that we needed to evacuate right away. And we ended up getting about a foot of water in our home during that flooding event. So it is a very real risk. And it's so important that you are aware of where those reservoirs are, where dams are, where levees are, because during flash flooding and severe rain events, there may be a similar type of situation, not necessarily full failure, but overtopping, perhaps slow release that could cause potential flooding in your area. So just something to be cognizant of. If you needed to evacuate, what major transportation corridors are likely to flood? Something to be cognizant of as well. Always have a plan. Where would you go? If you did have to execute that evacuation plan, would you be going into low-lying transportation corridors? What may that look like? Just something another thing to be cognizant of. Are your important household appliances elevated? Similar to clearing out debris, another type of home mitigation measure that homeowners may choose to take is elevating those important household appliances. For example, elevating your AC units above the base flood elevation level, which is depicted in those flood insurance rate maps. Do you have furnaces that could be elevated, washer dryers, so on and so forth? That can go a long way in terms of reducing the potential damage resulting from a flooding event to your property. And finally, do you have flood insurance? And do you know what is covered by it? So if you don't have flood insurance, we strongly recommend that you consider that, look into that. And if you would like to learn more information, we manage a website called floodsmart.gov. Again, that's floodsmart.gov, that has information about local flood insurance providers that service your community, and how you can initiate that conversation to learn a little bit more about flood insurance and receive quotes, understand the types of things that flood insurance would cover, and the types of things that flood insurance would not cover. So we highly recommend flood insurance, not only for people that are in those high hazard flood areas or even the less severe flood areas, but even people that are outside of that. Flood insurance is available for you, and it's always good to be safe rather than sorry. For this slide, again, if you are interested in purchasing flood insurance, you can visit that website. Here it is on the screen, floodsmart.gov. Some important things to note about flood insurance are that most homeowners insurance policies do not cover flooding, and that it typically takes up to 30 days for a policy to go into effect. So we are right in the height of hurricane season now. So if you've been thinking about purchasing flood insurance, just please know that it takes about 30 days for that policy to go into effect. So we would encourage you to initiate those conversations with a insurance provider sooner rather than later. Some interesting statistics here on this graphic that I wanted to share. So on average across the country, flooding causes more than $5 billion in damage each year. So just a phenomenal amount of damage here in the United States. Another lesser known fact, but something that can be incredibly powerful, is that if you have a national flood insurance policy, there's up to $30,000 in additional coverage available to policyholders to help them implement flood risk mitigation measures for their insured properties. So for example, I mentioned elevating appliances. If you choose to add that additional coverage to your policy, that can finance additional types of homeowner mitigation measures that you can take to further reduce your property's risk to flooding. Just a phenomenal program that not a lot of people know about. However, if you already have flood insurance, if you're thinking about getting flood insurance, talk with your insurance provider about possibly tacking on that additional coverage to fund homeowner flood risk mitigation measures. It's a great program. I would highly recommend it. And finally, this last bullet is always a surprise, I think, for a lot of people, but about 40% of all of the National Flood Insurance Program flood insurance claims actually come from outside of that high-risk flood zone. So just because your property may be in that special flood hazard area, that location on the map that we were looking at that was highlighted by the blue polygon, just because your house is in there does not mean that you're the only ones at risk to flooding. In fact, 40% of all flood insurance claims occur from areas outside of that zone. So by all means, if you're located in a moderate risk area, if you're even close to a body of water or just outside of those designated flood risk areas and you would like to purchase flood insurance, that flood insurance is available for you. And you can learn more about how to take out a policy and the types of things that it would cover and the potential insurance providers that service your area by, again, going to floodsmart.gov. I wanted to share an excellent guide for homeowners that may want to go the next step and start to do some retrofitting for flooding for your home. So this guide, the title on the left-hand side is The Homeowner's Guide to Retrofitting, 6 Ways to Protect Your Home from Flooding. You can find this just by searching on the internet. It's an excellent guide, quite comprehensive, but it talks about different things that homeowners may consider based on their unique flood risk. It talks about elevating your home. It talks about relocating. Sometimes relocation is an important mitigation action for homeowners to consider, and a very real possibility, and one that many homeowners do every year across the country. Demolition. So in some cases, there are programs in place across the country where we call them home buyouts, where residences will be bought out, homeowners will be provided funding for that home to purchase a home in an area of less flood risk. And then that previous home would be demolished and turned into green space in perpetuity to further prevent future flooding from happening to structures that may have otherwise still existed on that site. So demolition is another mitigation option as well. Wet floodproofing and dry floodproofing are also mitigation actions that homeowners can consider taking. The idea of wet floodproofing is that you would make portions of your home resistant to flood damage and allow water to enter your home during flooding. And that may sound slightly odd to you. However, I have an image on the next slide that will further explain wet floodproofing, if that is something that you're interested in pursuing. Dry floodproofing is kind of the inverse concept, where you're essentially sealing your home to prevent floodwaters from entering. In some cases, I've seen homes spray an adhesive sealant around the perimeters of their structure that prevent water from entering. In some cases, there are structural barriers, similar to like a brick wall that would kind of encase a home that essentially function as a dry floodproofing mitigation measure for that home. So this guide and this book can provide some more information for homeowners that want to take that next level and consider doing some retrofits to their structure themselves. And then finally, it also talks about some barrier systems, such as building flood walls or levees around your home to restrain floodwaters. So these images, this one in the middle shows an example of wet floodproofing. So here, I'll call your attention to the openings that are highlighted in these red circles, which were essentially constructed to allow floodwaters to enter these enclosed areas below the floor, which may be a basement or a crawl space or a foundation wall. And that by allowing that water to enter, there's actually a reduction in the hydrostatic pressure that often results in the failure of structural systems from homes. So by allowing the water to enter and then exit when the floodwaters recede, will of course require cleanup. However, the structural integrity of buildings is often is much less impacted for structures that have these types of mitigation actions in place. For dry floodproofing, just an example up here on the top right-hand side. So I think this particular picture is stating that there's an external coating or covering impervious to floodwater around the home. It looks like there's a little maybe a concrete or brick enclosure that they're able to open or close around their doors for their structure. And they also have a backflow valve in place, which would prevent sewer and drainage backup into their home during a flooding event. So an example of dry floodproofing there. And finally, in this lower right-hand corner, we do have a picture of an elevated appliance. So it looks like this homeowner just constructed a kind of a brick mount to place their AC unit on top of. So it's something that you may consider if you do have appliances that are at the ground level, in your basement. Just elevating them can make a world of difference in terms of reducing damages to your structures and homes during flooding events. Of course, mitigation is only one aspect to this. The other important thing that we all need to do is, be aware of intensifying weather conditions during a potential storm, flash flooding event, a rain event, etc. So if you don't already have the FEMA app on your phone, I would highly recommend that you go to use your smartphone, download the FEMA app. This will allow you to receive emergency weather notifications, information about preparing for your home, disaster resources, many other things, the location of shelters, a variety of other things related to emergency management that may be helpful for you during a severe event. I was also looking online in preparation for this meeting to see which of the counties in District 7 also have their own alert systems. So if for those of you that are on the call that live in Hunterdon County, Morris County, Somerset, Union, or Warren, you can also go to the county's website, specifically their emergency management focused pages of those websites, and enter in your phone number, and that will allow you to receive notifications of potential emergencies in your area as well. Finally, the other thing that I skipped over there was the NOAA weather radio stations. So I personally have a NOAA weather radio that I purchased. It can be powered from the sun. It has solar panels on the top. I can also power that manually. It has a crank lever that I can rotate to charge as well, just so that I can continue to monitor weather during a power outage in my area. So all things to consider, signing up for or looking into, just to be aware of potential risk during events in the future. That is of course not enough. We always recommend that people make a plan. So FEMA has a number of resources online about templates, information about how to make a plan for a emergency. And we recommend that you make a plan for your household. Convene with your family around a table and talk about what you would do if there was a flash flooding event. Think about what you would do for your pets. Talk about where you would go, what you would need to do to protect yourselves from flooding. You can learn and practice evacuation routes, shelter plans, and flash flood response, and also use this opportunity to gather supplies for a disaster supply kit, which may include non-perishable foods, cleaning supplies, water for several days, and in case you must leave the area immediately, or if services are cut off to your area. I took a few bullets from the recommended list of items for a disaster supply kit, which I put it here on the screen. If you want to make a basic kit, these are the things that we would recommend. So water, 1 gallon per person per day for several days, which can be used for drinking and sanitation. Also food, at least a several day supply of non-perishable food. In my kit, I have a lot of canned goods. I have a big bag of almonds. I have some canned tuna, things of that nature, non-perishable foods that I can keep in my bag and have that available for me at a moment's notice. As I mentioned, I also have a battery-powered or hand crank radio in my kit. So another thing to consider purchasing if you don't already have one. A flashlight, a first aid kit, extra batteries, a whistle to signal for help. Some other things to consider are dust mask, plastic sheeting or duct tape, especially for chemical events. If you need to shelter in place, plastic sheeting can come in handy for a variety of things. However, moist towelettes and garbage bags with plastic ties, a wrench or pliers to turn off utilities, a manual can opener, local maps, and also a cell phone with chargers and a backup battery. There's some additional supplies that you could consider beyond just the basic list items that we included on the previous list. So this one mentions things like mask, soap, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes. Medications are very important, within your kit. If you need to evacuate on a moment's notice, like I mentioned, when I was a child and the fire department were coming door to door telling us to evacuate, being able to quickly grab what you need and get out of there, it is very much a matter of life and death. So being able to grab your kit with your essential items is so important. And that of course includes any medications that you may need. Some other things here, of course, things if you have infants, formula, bottles, diapers, wipes, etc. If you have pets, making sure that they're being thought of as well. So food and extra water for them. It's important to have cash on hand. In many cases, if ATMs go out, power goes out, there may be very limited functionality for you to use your credit or debit cards, that kind of thing. So having cash on hand is always something that is a good thing to think about. Having important documents such as copies of insurance policies, things of that nature are very important as well. So having those in a waterproof container. Sleeping bags, a change of clothes, fire extinguishers, matches in a waterproof container, feminine supplies and personal hygiene items, mess kits, paper and pencils, books, games, and puzzles, and other activities for children, all things that you could consider putting in your kit. This is my kit. So I have just a backpack here with a variety of things that you see here on the screen. I have water along with some water in this little packet on the left-hand side that has a 5-year shelf life. You see some of that non-perishable food. I have some backup USB chargers there in a plastic bag, a first aid kit. I have some plastic sheeting that is actually in the that vinyl backpack there that you see, some important documents, in a waterproof Ziploc there, some Huggies diapers, and a sleeping bag and a mess kit, maps, things of that nature. And all of these types of things can be stored in a backpack, a duffel bag if you want to go with some of the additional items that we mentioned on the previous screen, or in a plastic container. And this is ready for me to grab at a moment's notice if I need to evacuate, but also something that I can use should I need to shelter in place as well. So if you are in a flood warning, there's some important things to consider. So maybe you've already gone ahead and downloaded that FEMA app as we've been talking over the past few minutes. Maybe you've already registered for your county emergency alerts, but as soon as you get that flood warning notification, it's important to find shelter right away. The second bullet, if you leave with nothing after this webinar except this bullet, this would be just so important. Do not walk, swim, or drive through floodwaters. Turn around, don't drown. Over half of all deaths in the United States during flash flooding events occur in people's vehicles. I remember last year, there was a person driving during a flooding event in New Jersey, and the water was not even that deep, 10 inches or so. Their car was lifted from that water and sucked down a storm drain. So important. Turn around, don't drown. If you're evacuating in your vehicle and you find yourself in a situation on a corridor where there is water, turn around, don't drown. Remember, just 6 inches of moving water can knock you down, and 1 foot of moving water is enough to sweep your vehicle away. Bridges regularly get washed out during flooding events with fast-moving water underneath them. So just something to be very cognizant of. That's a very common type of damage that we see to transportation infrastructure during flooding events as well. So staying safe during a flood, evacuate immediately if you're told to evacuate. Never drive around barricades. Local responders use them to safely direct traffic out of flooded areas. Then always remember to listen to that emergency alert system, the NOAA weather radio, or your local alerting systems for current emergency information and instructions regarding flooding. As we mentioned previously, stay off bridges over fast-moving water. Fast-moving water can wash bridges away without warning. Stay inside your car if it is trapped in rapidly moving water. Get on the roof if water is rising inside the car. Get to the highest level if trapped in a building. Only get on the roof if necessary, and once there, signal for help. After a flood, it's important to pay attention to authorities for information and instructions, and to return home only when authorities say it's safe. Avoid driving except in emergencies. Wear heavy work gloves, protective clothing, and boots during cleanup, and use appropriate face coverings or masks if cleaning mold or other debris. And remember that people with asthma or other lung conditions or immune suppression should not enter buildings with indoor water leaks or mold growth that can be seen or smelled, and children should not take part in disaster cleanup work. Just to continue on the idea of staying safe after a flood, be aware that snakes and other animals may be in your house. There may be a risk for electrocution, so do not touch electrical equipment if it is wet or if you are standing in water. Turn off the electricity to prevent electric shock if it is safe to do so. Avoid wading in floodwater, which can be contaminated and contain dangerous debris. Underground or downed power lines can also electrically charge the water. And finally, if you do have a generator, use that generator or other gasoline-powered machinery only outdoors and away from windows. I included a couple of pictures of me here on the right-hand side. This is a picture of my dad and myself cleaning up after a flooding event that our aunt had experienced. She lost a lot of essentially everything. I think the water came up to about 5 feet on her first floor apartment, and we were there trying to salvage what we could. Found some of her childhood toys, which is what he's holding up there. And then the bottom picture is actually picture from a flooding event where we lost a lot of our just family pictures and things like that. So a lot of water damages to some of these really important memories that I had growing up, and things that we were just never able to prepare. But I can tell you just the importance of caution and safety, and wearing protective equipment if you find yourself in a situation where you have been flooded and you're in that mucking and gutting phase, and coming back to your residence. That's just so important to be safe and cautious. And finally, just getting to the conclusion of the PowerPoint here, we will be providing these slides to you afterwards, and we wanted to make sure that you had the potential to visit some of our excellent informational resources that we have online. So if you want to learn more about the National Flood Insurance Program, if you want to share flood safety information, perhaps where you work, we have social media tools and a toolkit that you can use to do that. There are a number of excellent videos, information about how to file a flood insurance claim, what homeowners insurance covers during a flood and what it doesn't, and things of that nature. So before I conclude, the last piece of information that I have is just a very short video that summarizes kind of what we talked about. So I'll play this before concluding the presentation.
Clouds form, the rain pours, and water is all around. You'll ask yourself, how prepared or unprepared are you? Did you raise your utilities, appliances and such? Install a sump pump, clean the drains, just in case it decides to rain. Do you know your risks? Have you checked the local plans? You should cover your property with a flood insurance policy. Is your emergency supply kit packed? Is your family prepared? Do they know what to do, where to go, and how to stay safe? Because when the water starts to rise, you must act quickly and be wise. Turn on your radio, listen for updates, and if authorities tell you to go, hurry up and do so. Get to safe ground, go as high as you can, do what you need to do, but don't put yourself in harm's way. Just inches of water can sweep you away. Once the water is gone, move carefully. Be on the lookout for dangers you can't see, animals, debris, and electricity. Do not go home until you hear the all clear. Now, when you get home, be aware. Not everything is as safe as it may appear. So before the clouds form, the rain pours, and water is all around, get prepared, make a plan, and keep yourself dry. Get started today. Go to ready.gov/prepare.
All right. Thanks everyone. If you are interested in maintaining a dialogue with FEMA Region 2's National Preparedness Division, I would recommend that you sign up for our bi-weekly bulletins. We regularly do webinars and trainings, both virtually and in person. And if you're interested in participating in one of those types of events, you can shoot a quick email to our preparedness inbox, FEMA-R2-prepares@fema.dhs.gov, and you will get on our listserv to receive those bi-weekly bulletins from our office. So I wanted to thank everyone here, and then pass it back over to Nuri, our moderator, for any additional follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Race. This presentation was extremely helpful, and we have some really great resources from it. I put this in the chat feature as well, but we will be sending out these slides after this event. So if you missed any of those hyperlinks, or you want to re-review the presentation, you will get it into your inbox, as well as it will come through our e-newsletter as well. And if you haven't signed up for that yet, I'm dropping that link for that newsletter in the chat feature right now. We're going to jump right into some live questions since we have some time. Again, if you have a question you would like to ask Race or any additional follow-up, please first ask your question using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Just so we can distinguish between who is asking the questions, please also include your name and the town you are from along with your question. That way I can unmute the right person as well. To start, we have Priscilla from Union. Priscilla, I'm just unmuting you now, and you can go ahead with your question.
Hello everyone. This is Priscilla from Union. I have a question about the flood preparedness. So my question is, what is the state of the READI, which is the Real Emergency Access and Aging Inclusion and Disaster, and also the Direct Medicaid Relief Act? And another question is, if essential assisted technology can be included in the flood insurance policy. Like, say, for example, if somebody loses their home because of flooding and has essential assistive technology that is needed, and also the durable medical equipment, will that be included? Thank you.
Priscilla, thank you so much for that. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the real system that you mentioned, so I unfortunately cannot answer that question, but thank you for sharing that. The second question regarding the types of things that are covered under your flood insurance policy, there is a distinction between contents coverage and building coverage. So if you wanted to talk with a potential flood insurance provider, they can go over exactly what types of things would be covered under that flood insurance policy. But that would need to be a conversation that you would have with them. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. Next up, we're going to go to Nomi from Raritan Township. Nomi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead with your question.
Okay, there's a creek along the back of my property line, and there was flooding the last event we had. So I went online to see what sort of proactive recommendations I could do to fortify the beds of the creek. North Carolina and California have online sites, and they recommend planting ground cover. In New Jersey, I couldn't find any information, but I see that our local county road crews have been putting rocks into riverbeds or creek beds. I wonder what your recommendations would be to fortify the earth walls of creeks or streams.
Yeah, Nomi, thank you so much for that question. And thank you for being proactive in the flood mitigation in your community. It sounds like what they were installing was something called a riprap, which is a type of flood mitigation technique that you can do to strengthen the kind of the barriers of a creek or a river, things of that nature. But not knowing the unique situation of that creek, I'm not quite sure the best course of action. However, it sounds like the community and the county may already be addressing some of that. So I'd be very interested in maybe reaching out to that department, learning a little bit more about what they're doing. But it sounds like you have your eyes and ears open. You're thinking about the types of things that are going on surrounding your property that could impact you for flooding. So thank you so much for being aware of that. And it sounds like there are already some mitigation actions taking place, but perhaps connecting with your local government officials to learn more may be a good course of action as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nomi. Next up, we have Noreen. Noreen, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead with your question. Noreen, you can go ahead with your question. Oh, do I have to unmute you again? There you go.
It's my. Not trying to belabor this, but my dogs are going crazy right now. So would you mind asking my question?
Yes, no problem. Let me just scroll up to it. So, Race, will FEMA provide money for the type of remediation you were speaking of, or sorry, remediation you were speaking of? She lives in NJ07 on a stream, it's Harmony Brook, and she's also a member of NJOP, which is a great advocacy group in our district as well. So will FEMA provide money for types of remediation you were speaking of earlier?
The types of flood remediation that you may have to undertake following a disaster are things that are often covered by your flood insurance policy. So in that regard, the answer would be yes. However, I would strongly encourage you to review your policy. You know, we're right in the thick of hurricane season, and we could have a flood just around the corner. So I think it would be important to review that policy, maybe meet with your agent to better understand what types of things would be covered should you have to remediate things following a disaster. If your question was also focused on the increased coverage that would allow you to proactively take mitigation measures, that would have to be something that you added to your flood insurance policy when you took it out, and something that you can certainly still do. So if you want to, call up your agent and say, hey, I was participating in this flood webinar and I learned that there's up to $30,000 in increased coverage under a flood insurance policy that would allow me to do some home retrofitting to reduce my flood risk. And I'd like to learn more about that. That's something that I would recommend that you do as well.
Hope that answered your question, Noreen. All right, we are going to take one more question today, just one more question. I know there are more in the chat feature, but I will put our contact form in the chat as well. So if your question wasn't answered today, you can reach out to us and we'll do our best to get you that answer for you. Our last question is going to be from Andrea. Andrea, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good afternoon. My question is, how does FEMA track the out-of-state contractors or people that are coming to inspect? The reason for the question is if you have to prove anything, in following years, how do you locate those contractors that were just there for the disaster?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know the best answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. I have had experience, after a disaster event when many out-of-state contractors do arrive in the area. But in terms of how they were being, tracked, I recall, there were different things going on at the state and local level that were tracking contractors. I think there were systems set up to allow for homeowners to, share information about, bad contractors, if you will, with those authorities. But my experience is that it was being kind of managed at a local and state level rather than through FEMA. But I'm not 100%, so I apologize for that, but that's just been my personal experience.
Thanks so much, Andrea. All right, that just about wraps up today's conversation. Again, I'm just going to re-up some resources for everyone. So if you are having an issue with accessing your FEMA relief or getting in contact with an agent at FEMA, we recommend that you reach out to our casework team by visiting malinowski.house.gov/casework. I'm putting that in the chat feature again right now, casework. One of our constituent service representatives will look over your information. We will do our best to help you out and direct you to the right point of contact. If you have a question that wasn't answered throughout today's conversation, you can visit our contact form at malinowski.house.gov/contact. And again, these slides, as well as a recording of today's session, will be shared after once we close. I'm going to turn it over to Race for some final remarks. And thank you everyone so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation. Race, you can close us out.
Yes, thank you so much for hosting this and inviting FEMA to present during this presentation. I hope that everyone that was able to attend got something out of this, and that you're able to make use of the things that you learned, and also some of the resources that will be circulating to you after this event. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope everyone has a nice rest of your day. Thank you.